one of the best things about this podcast, or at least what I'm trying to do, is bring the reality of the industry to the people who are listening at home, because there's so much bullshit now that you see on social media, through courses, through trainings. It's not all crap. A lot of it's real, a lot of it works. Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Airbnb Nomads podcast. And on this week's Property Education Masterclass, we're joined by a personal friend of mine, Mr. Richard Stone. Now, Rich is a trainer, mentor, expert, industry property expert on everything construction related. If you've got a new property project, whether it's a flip, HMO or new build development, you need to have this guy on your team. So stick around for the entire episode. There's so much knowledge in this one. Guys, if you get knowledge from this episode, please do give us a follow and leave us a review. It helps us so much. Until then, get comfortable. This is a great episode. Here we go. Richard Stone, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Mate, I really appreciate your time. It is bloody cold outside, so thanks for making the effort. Look, I consider you a friend. You are a trainer, mentor, well-known construction industry expert. I wanted to have you on the show because I know how much value you can bring to the audience. I've personally seen you speak. I know what you're about. I know how much knowledge that you have. So I wanted to get that out of your head and into this episode. So Rich, why don't you just tell us a little bit about you and what it is that you do? Okay,
cool. Well, firstly, thank you for the opportunity to come and talk to you and talk to your guest. A second for the invitation. So the phase of my life I'm in now is very much about taking the stuff that I've accumulated, the knowledge I've accumulated in over 30 years in the industry, and actually sharing that with others and empowering other people to actually go out and deliver projects, safely, legally, compliantly, profitably, and on time. And I've got a very simple toolkit to be able to do it. It's not a complicated process, but it's like anything. If you don't know, you don't know that stuff, right? So I've been a contractor, I've been a developer, I've worked in other people's construction companies. I'm currently a non-exec of 6 construction businesses, as well as having my mentees that I mentor with projects and with their construction businesses as well. And we also deliver our own developments as well. But we're very, very picky about the sort of stuff we want to do. So you'll never see us with like 10, 12 projects on site, because that's not us. We're kind of like 1 or 2 at a time, steady, slowly, very, very specific. Like when we're appraising sites, it's got to really, really tick every single one of our boxes.
Yeah. And I think, one of the best things about this podcast, or at least what I'm trying to do, is bring the reality of the industry to the people who are listening at home, because there's so much bullshit now that you see on social media, through courses, through trainings. It's not all crap. A lot of it's real. A lot of it works. There's some fantastic training out there, some fantastic opportunities. Changed my life, changed your life, changed a lot of people's lives. But there's a lot of people that are going into it blind. And sometimes you hear people speak, you see people on stage, you listen to people who speak with authority, and you're like, that is important shit. Like, people need to know this stuff. And just a bit of background on my relationship with Richard. So I first heard you speak, God, I don't know, what are we going back now? 3, 4 years ago,
4 years
maybe?
ago, yeah.
It was a while.
Yeah, certainly.
And I was doing some training. You came on to give your keynote and spoke about the importance around safety on site and how to protect yourself, not just physically from injuring yourself, but even, some might argue, even more important, legally, to stop yourself from getting banged up. And I remember walking out of there thinking, damn, it was almost like, you done what I think you was trying to do, which was scare us all into thinking, oh my God, we need to take action either by working with yourself or by working with someone who can guide us through this stuff. So that's what I want to get out of this episode, is for people who are starting to dip their toes into some of the bigger stuff, is how to go about it the right way. So what is that process? So let's take me. Let's say I've just done a course. I'm walking out of that school, of that training academy, and I'm looking to get into my first project. First of all, can it be as simple as, let's say, a flip? Do I still need to think about working with someone like yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Because the reality of the situation is that any form of construction work, so whether that might be, a £1,500 bit of a tart up of a tired unit and you're going to put it out as SA, that's construction work. And if you've got more than one trade on site, the law says you need a principal designer and you need a principal contractor. Now, the reality of that in a small project is that that's going to become a significant part of the cost. as a percentage of the overall spend. When you get into bigger projects, obviously the percentage of that cost comes down massively, but the requirement is still there. The requirement is still there to plan the project properly, to have the right legal framework in place, to have the right paperwork and processes and systems in place to protect everybody on site from having accidents, because the whole premise is that if you can move a line on a page, it's far safer to do that than move a wall on site. So it's all about actually putting the time into planning it properly before you even set foot onto a building site. And, that's what we teach people how to do, because learning a property strategy is great, and I'm a massive advocate of people being taught that, but you need to understand how to actually go and implement that in the real world, in a construction environment, in a construction arena, which is the property that you might either just take control of in a rent-to-rent arrangement, or you might purchase, or you might actually do as a joint venture with somebody else and purchase it jointly. The client is the ultimate duty holder under the construction design and management regulations, and lots of people don't appreciate that.
And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but why, I'm thinking, why is this stuff not talked about or discussed enough on the training courses? And I think it always comes back. This is the problem with a lot of the training. The stuff that's sold is the sexy stuff. It's the numbers, it's the money, it's the profits, it's the opportunities, in order to get people to enroll on the course, which I kind of get. But the stuff like what you do and the important legal stuff and, the health and safety stuff, it's not the kind of stuff. It's actually going to have the reverse effect and maybe push people away a little bit. So is that why it's pushed under the carpet?
Is it why? I don't know I don't know, because I can't know what someone else is thinking. What I do think is that if you make something really complicated, potentially people might not want to do it. And also there is this kind of lots of people think that the Form F10, which is the notification to the HSE of a project, there are lots of people under the misapprehension that that's when CDM applies. That's not the case. CDM applies to every project. You just have to notify it to the HSE if it's over 30 days for 20 people or 500 person days. So I think there's probably, you can't teach someone everything in a 2, 3, 4, 5 day course, however long and there's hundreds of different products out there. So you can't teach all of that stuff. What you need to do is signpost people and say, look, when you get a project, what you need to do is engage with a professional to help you. And that doesn't have to cost tens of thousands of pounds. If you're doing a simple BRI, you can set the compliance up on that for literally $2 or $3 grand. It's not a lot of money, but it's more about, for me, it's who, not how. It's understanding that all people need to know is, right, they need to understand, they need to go and hire somebody to act as contract administrator and principal designer. That's all people need to know is actually, right, that's what you need. And then let the professional do their job. As opposed to people trying to do it themselves. And I see this all the time. I've got a client right now where it's about $8 grand's worth of work to unravel all the mess they've created by trying to create all the documents themselves. And they've tripped themselves up and effectively tied their shoelaces together.
Yeah, and then you've got to undo all that work.
Before you can even get back to zero, and then you've got to set it up properly to go again. So
let's bring it back to a real grassroots level, because I'll be completely honest, when you... because of the nature of the job and all of these acronyms and, codes and legislation, and it's that, blah, 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 and at the end of
lots to it. Yeah.
You're like, what was all that about? So, for someone who's sitting at home thinking, I still don't really know what this guy does or what he's talking about. Let's just say, I've just taken on my first project. It's a very simple flip. Maybe we're going to, build an extension. We're going to do a bit of a refurb, nothing crazy. Maybe put down a new driveway, redo the garden. What is it exactly that I need you to come in and advise me on? Like, what is the real nuts and bolts of what you would do for me?
So it depends. So let's assume that you're doing this for investment. So it's not your own house, because the way the law applies is different
It's an investment property.
Yeah, so it's an investment property. So it's a commercial premise. So the CDM regulations for that require you to, if you've got more than one trade on site, require you to appoint a principal designer to oversee the design and make sure it's done properly, to appoint a principal contractor who's...
Sorry, Rich, just dig into that then. What is a principal designer?
Okay, exactly. So the principal designer's job is to pull together all of the relevant information in relation to the existing building.
Right.
To pull that together, to present to the designers so that they've got all of the right information, and to put together the pre-construction information, which includes things like a designer's risk assessment. It includes a risk assessment for the site. It includes a schedule of all of the risks that are going to become apparent during the course of the contract, so that when the contractor comes along, the principal contractor needs to write their safety plan. They've got a basically a design professional has said, right, here's all the things that you need to comply with in order to make this safe.
And this is not an architect.
Sometimes it can be, but it's not automatically. And this whole world changed this year, which is why I think doing this podcast really important, because the whole building regulations situation changed post-Grenfell, and they were brought in 2023 under transitional arrangements, and they're now law, and they now are applicable from April 2024, to put a timestamp on this episode. So now the building control department will not come to site and say, you need to do X or Y or Z. Your designer, the client's design team, have to provide a compliant design that satisfies building control, and they have to demonstrate how they've done that. So the principal designer's role can be undertaken by an architect, but quite a lot of architects are reluctant and unwilling to do it. In any event, some will do it, but they want an additional level of fees because it's an additional level of risk. And, it is causing a bit of an issue out there for people because lots of people don't even know about it.
Well, that's exactly it. And I'm thinking, if I've just taken on this property, I need to know first that I need you there.
Absolutely.
So how do you know that if you're not told it?
You don't. And that's the thing. And that's why I spend so much time doing podcasts, doing interviews, doing media stuff, teaching people project management, because loads of people don't even know that stuff. I literally was on Zoom last night with a client who's done 26 HMO conversions. And the way they want to approach a project is fraught with risk and danger. And they're actually walking head first into a massive car crash because they're stepping into the role of a designer with none of the skills, knowledge, attitude, training, educational experience to fulfill that role.
Yeah. Okay, so you've got your principal designer. Who's the next person that you need on site?
So principal contractor, which is effectively what people would think of as their builder. But the role of principal contractor is a legal role, and they have to be appointed in writing by law. If you don't appoint a principal contractor in writing, it becomes you as the client. And that's extremely risky because the principal contractor's role is to manage and coordinate all of the contractors and all of their health and safety arrangements, including pre-qualifying all those subcontractors.
So would the principal contractor ever say to you, would he come to me and say, hey, Alex, where's your principal designer?
Yes, and they have a legal duty to do that as well.
So he should, or she should be telling me or asking me, where's this person?
Yeah, absolutely, they should, yeah. The reality is, though, unfortunately, that, we don't live in a perfect world. Most builders, and I teach a lot of builders, I mentor construction teams, lots of them don't even know about this stuff because most small builders and small trades might go to trade school, might learn their craft from like grandfather's rights from doing an apprenticeship. Even if they do, the stuff they learned in college 20 years ago is the only safety training and the only project management training they've ever had. So all of this stuff is new to a lot of people, and it doesn't, just because your builder that you want to use says, I don't know about it, that does not make them a bad builder. And I'm not here to say that they're a bad contractor because some of them are actually really good, but they just don't know that stuff. So for them, it's an unknown. So you've got a client who's the person who knows the least about all of this in the arrangement, but with the biggest risk because they're the ultimate duty holder. They've probably not appointed a principal designer because they didn't know they needed one. And the contractor they've chosen has got no idea that what a principal designer and principal contractor's requirements even are.
Yeah.
So all of those risks fall back on the client.
Right, okay. And where does the surveyor fit into the whole system? So
when you say the surveyor, there's lots of different types of surveyors.
Because you were saying that the principal, the first one, the principal designer is going to put together your whole schedule of works.
So the principal designer won't put together the schedule of works. The architect will put together the schedule of works. Right. The principal designer will review it to look at what risks are involved in it, and then that will form part of the risk assessment. But they won't actually write. I mean, some people do it. We do it for people, but you can't just assume that because you've hired an architect, they would put together that schedule of works. We're just doing a project that goes on site next year, and we're just looking through lining up all the different fee proposals at the moment. We've got architects whose fee quote's this big and the number's this big. We've got others whose spreadsheet is this big of all the stuff they're doing and their price is this big. So understanding what you're getting from your professionals is absolutely crucial. We've got a client we're working with on a consultancy basis right now. They've paid an architect 46 grand for a design package, and it doesn't even include building regs drawings.
Wow.
Because they didn't set out what they wanted at the beginning, because they didn't know what they needed, because it was their first project. They've paid out a load of money, and we're now been brought in to try and sort out the mess and say, well, actually, Like that, well, it's not really a fair bargain. What you should have done is X, Y, and Z, and try and unpick it and try and not get their money back, but at least get them the value they thought they were going to procure in the first place.
Because I remember the other thing that you was talking about, which was a real eye opener, was from a legal perspective, if you don't follow the process, follow the steps, have the right people on site. It's not just the paperwork, is it, and the boxes that need ticking by the right person, but it's everything down to the signage.
Yeah,
making sure you got the right netting up, even making sure that you got a toilet on site that works in the right way.
Absolutely.
So, this is basically your job, right? This is what you do. You come along and you basically consult. Is that right? On every single part of the process.
Yeah, and we say, right, this is what you need. So the first thing we want to understand is we'll do a bit of a knowledge appraisal to understand how educated the client is. And that's not to kind of like make them feel silly or find their knowledge is wanting, but it's so that we can then put in the knowledge nuggets that we need to so they understand. Because we have a legal duty to make sure clients understand what the CDM regs are and understand what their responsibility is. So if we don't have a baseline for what their knowledge is, we don't know what we need to bring them up to speed on. So we do that first, then we look at what is the project, and then from there we'll say, right, this is what you need in order to be compliant. So you definitely will need a principal designer. You're definitely going to need a principal contractor. Here's how you go about pre-qualifying them to make sure that they're actually compliant and they're experienced. And then from there we can say, right, this is what good would look like on this project, and that's what you need as an absolute minimum to actually step forward and deliver the project compliantly. Because you're quite right, it is about having the right contracts in place, and we advocate using JCT contracts on every project because it's simple and it's certain and it's absolutely clear about who's responsible for what risks. What's the price? What's the program? Who's responsible for insurance? When's it starting? When's it finishing? If it's not finished by then, what are the financial consequences of that? There's all sorts of stuff. A minor works JCT contract's 19,000 words. That's the smallest version that they do for commercial projects.
And this is a contract between you as the owner of the project and your principal
and the contractor. So it's a contract between what's called the employer, which is the client, and the contractor. And then in there, it can stipulate whether the contractor's down to do any design or not, who's going to be the contract administrator, so somebody that's going to act impartially. And then everything is set out in black and white so that it's really clear. Construction is about communication. If you sort the communication out, the rest of it will flow swimmingly. If the communication's found lacking, it's an absolute car crash.
Yeah. And, just in 10 minutes that we've been talking, it's so clear how many moving parts there are to the process. So, why would you even try and go out there and do it yourself? You're just lining yourself up for disaster, really.
Absolutely. And, it's not complicated. I was pretty much asked to leave school. I wasn't, I went to school because it was where the rugby pitch and the cigarette shop was, and it's where I met my wife, but that's a different story. I'm not really super highly educated. I put myself through construction college, but I've got decades and decades of experience of doing this stuff properly. So I understand how to do it, and I understand how to do it relative to the size of the opportunity. We've got a project, we're doing 50 units on one site. We've got 2 different contractors on different parts of the site. So, and I've done whole housing estates. I've done vertical stuff at up to 30 floors, but it's about bringing the right toolkit for the right opportunity. You don't need all of that depth of knowledge and paperwork to be able to do a flip, but you still have to comply with the same law, so you need the same process. Yeah.
And something else that that you said when I saw you speak before, which was like, slap in the face, it was like, Jesus, is, if you have a project and you go on holiday for, a couple of weeks to the other side of the world, you could be literally in Australia. And if one of the contractors or someone comes on site who's not meant to be there and they trip over a wire, break their arm, fall down the stairs, God forbid, and break their neck, you're going to get a phone call. You're responsible.
You're liable, yeah.
Even if you're on the other side of the world.
Doesn't matter where you are. Yeah, you'd be on the moon if you want. You're still liable. You can't. The thing is, and this is what people, I get people that try and think that they can be a bit clever and say, well, I've got a contract with a builder, so it must be their responsibility. Well, the builder might be responsible for the site, potentially, if you've actually got a written contract, which loads of people don't even have a written contract, but the client's the ultimate duty holder under CDM regulations. And that can be something simple. I had a client last year who had an issue where a delivery was made by a builder's merchant and a guy stood on a temporary manhole and went down a manhole. Now, he didn't break any bones. His insurance company had to settle out of court for that because he's liable. And they knew that if they started to unravel it, there's no health and safety inductions, there's no signing in, there's no method statement, there's no temporary fencing to prevent anybody getting onto site. Well, under the Health and Safety at Work Act, your primary obligation is to prevent unauthorised access. So they knew that they didn't really have anywhere to go with it. And, you know, and was it a vexatious litigant? Potentially, you know, the guy's like grazed his leg. Really? Did he even really graze his leg? Who knows? The fact is that he was on that site and he's bought an insurance claim. So the person who owns the site and is responsible for it, their insurance just want to get rid of that risk as quickly as possible, because they know that if the other side start getting clever and start saying, well, can we have this, can we have that, they haven't got it. And if you haven't got that stuff, then you can potentially be opened up to an investigation from the HSE. Well, you know, they win 93% of prosecutions and their average fine's over £80,000.
If you love to travel like me and you understand the power in escaping the money for time exchange trap, but you just don't know how to do it, then building an Airbnb consultancy business could be exactly what you have been looking for. Right now in the UK, there is a completely untapped opportunity through helping struggling Airbnb hosts by turning around their underperforming properties and generating you huge commission payments in the process. We are going to teach you all of the tools and all of the techniques that we've learned over the last 5 years through building our very own multiple six-figure Airbnb business, arming you with everything that you need to swoop in and save the day. Minimal startup costs, zero risk, and almost unlimited potential. Sound good? Welcome to the Airbnb Consultant. Contact us through any of the channels included in the studio notes to get the conversation started. Christ. I think something that's maybe not recognised or realised by most people, myself as well, is there's this misconception that we only really need to work with someone like you if we're doing big stuff. I don't know why that is, why we think that, but it's like, oh, I only need all of the rules and the regs and the health and safety requirements and the signage and this and that if I'm doing big new builds or if I'm doing massive conversions. But are you saying that even if I was to do a rent-to-rent deal, and like, what's the limit here? Let's say I take on a rent-to-rent deal. That's a lot of people listening to this are doing rent-to-rent, right? They take on a property, they're going to give it a lick of paint. I don't know, maybe they're going to do a real basic redo on some of the front driveway.
Yeah, maybe put a bit of flooring down.
Bit of flooring, basic stuff, some new, maybe a bit of a new kitchen, like clean up. Is it still, do they still need to go through these processes?
Still a construction project, yeah.
Really?
But the reality is, I mean, we're literally going through this process for probably our 100th client almost, if not more, who does BRRs. And we've literally created a toolkit where we can say, right, there's a toolkit of template documents that if you complete them relative to the project you're working on, we'll get you compliant. So that somebody can go and do that themselves. So they don't need to go and spend thousands on consultants every time they do a BRR because they're doing like 4 or 5 a month.
Is it?
It's not
no
realistic.
Deal would ever stack.
No. So we've actually created that so that people can use that toolkit to get themselves to be compliant. And it's why we teach people how to do it. Because, all I want my legacy to be is that the construction industry and people in property are actually doing it safer and keeping people safe and going out and making money. And if I can do that where they can do it themselves, I don't want loads of consultancy work. Time is our most precious commodity we've ever got, right? Absolutely. I don't want to become busier. I just want people to have the toolkit to be able to go out and do it and help themselves to make the money later on. But not only make the money, keep the profit. Because if something happens and there's an accident, your insurance company is going to have to pay out. If they have to pay out, you won't be able to get insurance because they'll terminate your policy. And if you've had an accident or a risk on site, how are you going to sleep at night with that? It takes 4 years on average for them to go through a prosecution. So the impact of that on someone's mental health for 4 years is huge. Whereas with a simple toolkit, you can, to a large degree, mitigate that risk, because if you educate people on what to do and how to do it properly, yes, I'm not going to pretend you're not going to get some trades that won't do it, and you might have to replace a plasterer or the odd carpenter or, insert whatever trade you want in to make it relevant to your own situation. But actually, if they don't want to work to that in the first place, all they're doing is taking massive risk under your banner. So do you really want them there in the first place?
So is that what happens in reality? Some trades that they won't sign up to.
They're not interested, yeah.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. But under the construction design and management regulations, which is law, and it's been updated. It came in 97. It was updated multiple times since then. The latest version is 2015. You have a legal duty to pre-qualify people on site. So you've got to check that they've got skills, knowledge, attitude, training, education, and experience. Well, what happens on bigger construction projects is that some people can't fulfill that. They can't demonstrate they've got that. So, but they still need to put bread on the table. So they then go and work in the property industry where actually there isn't those checks done. So they find it easier to get work. Well, that's great until something goes wrong and you walk upstairs to show a potential tenant round and the electrician's taken a load of floorboards up because he's got no idea that somebody's coming on site and nobody's signed in. You know, simple things like that can cause catastrophic accidents. I had one last year where somebody asked us for advice after the event because someone was showing someone round and they'd walked upstairs to show a tenant round and they didn't realise the electrician had taken up a floorboard behind them and they'd literally done their ankle and then fell downstairs.
And it comes straight comes straight back to you, right?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Came straight back. So it's just simple stuff like that. And it doesn't have to cost tens of thousands to be compliant. It's actually relatively inexpensive.
And it's also true, right, that if you're doing rent-to-rent stuff and you have somebody, you know, let's say that you have a leak or, you know, you need to call an electrician out, before that person comes into your property, the right thing to do, and hardly anyone really does it, and I understand why, because it's a little bit awkward and maybe, you know, you're rushing, you just need to get the job done. But you're actually meant to say, look, stop. Before you come in, I need to see your insurance. I need to see your qualifications, this and that. And if you don't do that again,
you're liable.
Because
you've not pre-qualified them under the CDM regs. Yeah.
So in your experience, does that happen?
Yeah, it does happen. Yeah, and people do get prosecuted because all it takes is something, and it can happen in lots of different ways. And I've seen this in many different occasions. It can be something as simple as it doesn't even have to be an accident. Because all a trade's got to do is take a picture of something and post it on social media and they can reverse engineer that. And the HSE do use social media proof to prosecute people. So there hasn't even got to be an accident for a start. Secondly, you quite often, when you're doing like refurbs and flips, you know, you've got neighbours that might be jealous, might think, oh, well, I'd love to do that, but I can't afford it. They love grassing people up to the HSE. You know, all you've got to do, if you've got 3 or 4 trades that you've got a price from and one of them doesn't win it and they haven't got any work and they're disgruntled and they see that the site's a bit of a car crash, they can easily report people. And I've seen that happen 3 times this year alone. That I know specifically about. I'm sure there's probably others. So there's lots of ways that actually you can end up getting caught out.
And what percentage of things that go wrong, let's say it's an accident, what percentage of those end in a fine compared to actually getting jail time?
I don't know the answer to that question.
Is it like if you pay the fine, you don't go to jail?
Not at all. No, that's not at all, because it's the HSE don't decide that. A judge would decide that. They would decide what's an appropriate punishment. And it can be. There's a guy called Kevin Leathers who had multiple times when they were fined. And in the end, the HSE took a view like a fine's not enough. This guy's just he's just carrying on doing the same thing again. You know, we've caught him, we've educated him, he's been fined. He's then done it again. We've caught him, educated him, he's been fined, done it again. And in the end, he got sent to prison.
It's like a rogue builder or something.
Yeah, roofer.
Yeah.
I mean, roofers, it's really common with roofers because of like working at height and the cost of getting somebody to work on a roof to do, you know, what people might perceive to be relatively low value work. You know, if you've got to put a roofer on a roof to maybe repoint a chimney or reflaunch a chimney or change a couple of slates, and you know the work's £500-600, but it's going to cost you £700-800 for scaffold. People don't want to pay for it. Well,
it's true.
Look, you can't have somebody working at height safely off of a roofing ladder for doing that sort of work. You know, a roofing ladder's meant for access only, not for going up there repairing half a roof.
I think with health and safety, and I think this is something that I try and be more aware of. It's something that, you know, you can be in a rush. You just need to nip up to the roof and grab that one thing, or, you know, you've got to get in and out and get it done quick. And you just think, you know, I'll leave the harness this time. I can't be bothered to go to the shop and get a face mask.
Yep.
You know, I just need to get this done. And then before you know it, your life can change in an instant.
Yeah, massively, yeah.
It's so common. Actually, yesterday I was grinding out some grouting in one of our properties, and I had the tools, but I didn't have a dust mask and a face shield. It was rush hour. I was like, it's going to take me half an hour to go 2 miles to B&Q, or I can just knock it out real quick. But, you know, fortunately I thought, no, I'm going to go and get the gear. You know, the grinder didn't blow up and anything like that, but it's like the right thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've had a lot of accidents over the years. I mean, I had one where a lump of a diamond disc came off of a blade and went in my eye, and I ended up being taken into Moorfields Eye Hospital in London. And literally, I was pretty much knocked out because I was on a bed, and they were coming at me with a set of tweezers to pull this piece of blade out, because when it hit my eye, it disintegrated into 48 bits. So I've got all these bits floating around my eye, and this woman had like pumped my eye full of iodine, and she's coming at this Oriental lady. She was lovely, really nice nurse, but she was coming at me with a set of like tweezers trying to pull these, and I just went like, bosh, have that, like just involuntary reaction. I didn't want to punch her, but I was like, just get like no.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's like that sort of thing can happen all the time.
Yeah, you got to take this stuff seriously. I remember before I got out my last job when I was working on boats, and I remember I was up we was in the dry dock, and we was quite high up, I don't know, 15 feet or something, and I was on the bow and I was cleaning. I had a harness on and everything, and I was clipped on, and I'm cleaning the bow, and then I just happened to kind of look over the edge, and I saw that the cord was on the floor. So it was like...
So you weren't clipped onto anything?
No, I was clipped on, but the cord was longer than the fault. So
that's not uncommon. I've seen that a few times.
That wouldn't have done much good. So yeah,
no.
I could have done with you then. But also, Rich, what you do, and I've worked with you on this, is that you can also come in and you can like crunch the deal.
Yeah, absolutely.
Numbers wise.
Yeah, I'm a trained chartered construction manager and trained cost consultant. So yeah, I can help people really kind of sweat the numbers, and we do that. We do that with property projects, but we also do it in a like a non-exec business capacity as well when they're looking at like bigger construction projects. So yeah, absolutely, getting people to look at the numbers, look at what are the things that are in there, and deals are complex. There's a lot of moving parts, and making sure that those numbers are right relative to that individual project. And we've done that with you and enjoyed success. So it's twofold. It's about making sure it's an opportunity, but it's also about ensuring that if it's not, why is it not? Why does it not stack up?
Yeah, and let's talk about a real case study around that. So I went to look at we're going back a little bit now, but a few years, but it was basically a big bed and breakfast in a beautiful location that I wanted to turn into, I can't remember what it was, 6 self-contained. 6 or 7
service accommodation
apartments. Wanted to go super high end with it. Did my own kind of numbers, did my own research. I'm not an expert. I'm not I don't really know it in depth, enough to kind of work to a kind of a bit of a blueprint that I had, kind of a one size fits all. Here's the square footage, times it by this much, blah, blah, blah. Did my numbers, it worked. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to get Rich in. Let's start the process. You came in, did the same thing, and came back, and I think it was like 80 or 100 grand over.
I can't remember the numbers.
It was significantly over. It was
significantly different, yeah.
And the whole thing, and there was a lot of stuff that I hadn't considered, stuff I'd left out, bits and pieces, which is natural, right? It's going to happen because it's not my main.
It's not your area of expertise, is it?
Yeah. So based on what Richard did, based on what Richard's input was, we ended up not moving forward with the deal, walking away, and ultimately saving a shitload of headaches. So, it's really something that you must do, in order to make sure that any projects are goer.
It's crucial. I mean, literally, I teach it, and I talk about, I teach a system which is 8 steps, but it starts at stage 0, because for me, doing that due diligence is absolutely crucial before you do anything else. Because you're going to appraise loads and loads of properties, loads of opportunities. Anybody that's in property knows that, you're appraising 30, 40, 50 deals quite often to get to something that actually stacks up. And it's as important, if not more important, to know when to walk away. Like Kenny Rogers has got a song, The Gambler. It's so true. You've got to know when to walk away from something because it doesn't stack up.
I think the problem is, Rich, is this whole, how do I know that the deal stacks up enough? How can I be sure enough that it's going to work before I start committing the money to bringing in people like yourself?
Yeah.
I know that you do go out and you'll do maybe a free consultation.
Yeah, we did consultations with people, absolutely.
To give people the confidence, but you can't be doing that all the time. And a lot of people who don't know you, or you're not close enough to them or whatever, how can they be sure enough before they say, okay, I'm ready to start investing money in this project?
I think the difficulty is that anything that creates substantial reward, such as property, has to come with a risk. So you have to be willing to invest in actually checking stuff out and making sure it's done properly. And, you know, there's a difference between opinion and advice, right? You go on, if you want an opinion, go on Facebook.
Yeah.
You know, there's loads of people out there, mostly called Karen.
Everyone's an expert.
They'll give you loads of advice. Most of it's like wholly unqualified. But if you actually want professional advice, that comes at a cost because, you know, we all have to carry professional indemnity insurance. Anybody with some minerals carries professional indemnity insurance. It's not cheap. So, and that's the thing with advice. It's backed by professional indemnity insurance. So if we say X, Y, and Z, you know, and that proves to be inaccurate. I've never had it, touch wood. But if it did, then my professional indemnity insurance is there to cover that risk. You're not going to get that just by having a conversation with somebody that you've met down the pub or someone that you know through work. It's about, because this is what we do for a job. You know, we've got charterships, we've got memberships that we uphold that have values and codes and conduct that we have to abide by. We can't just decide to do something because we feel like it, unlike other people that will do that. So, you know, there's massive value to be gained in actually ensuring that you're getting the right information at the right point in time. And I mean, I teach like my blueprint, I teach 0 to 7, so 8 steps. And I'm quite frugal, and so is my wife, but we're not adverse to spending money on consultants, but we only want to spend money on consultants at the right point in time.
Yes.
So to give you a practical example, our first hire is never, ever an architect. It's never an architect. Our first hire is always, always, always planning consultant. Because just because an architect can draw it doesn't mean we're going to get planning permission. And a planning consultant's job and what they've been trained to do is to understand the planning system. Now, an architect might have a smattering of knowledge about that, or, you know, it might have a reasonable amount of knowledge, but they're not going to have the same depth of knowledge as somebody who's trained and professional in planning. So our first person is always the planning consultant. Could we physically do this in this location with this use class? If that's a yes, brilliant, big green tick. Right, now let's go and talk to somebody about actually putting some lines on a page. Now,
is that after or before you've had an offer accepted on a deal?
So our offers are always conditional. Always, always, always. I always want parachute clauses. I get paid a lot of money to write contracts. I've had an awful lot of training in it, and I'm always about the parachute clause.
Do you find that a lot of, you know, agents or people that you're buying from are okay with that?
They don't have a choice. You know, they've got something that they want to sell. They want to broker a deal. If we're going to purchase it, I'm buying it on my rules. I'm not buying it on someone else's rules. I'm not,
because the only reason I asked that, and it reminds me of Wendy Brummel was on the show, and you know, I was talking about when I tried to get into, you know, the development game, and I went to look at this old ex-nursing home, and it needed planning, and I put forward an offer to the agent that was subject to planning.
Yep.
And she basically said, look, we've got 10 developers queuing up. They're all in Range Rovers with bags of cash.
Yeah.
They're happy to go with it because they've done it enough where they know they're going to get planning, or they know the person down the council that they're going to slip an envelope to, right? For example.
I can't possibly comment.
So it's like, you know, I'm talking about from someone who's like just trying to get into it, trying to do their first deal. It's like, how the hell do you compete?
Well, let's unpack that a little bit, because I think that's a really important point for people listening. So there is a big misconception. One, that estate agents tell the truth, firstly, because they don't always tell the truth, and there isn't always necessarily 10 Range Rovers lined up with people with a bootload of cash. So firstly,
maybe 9 and a Discovery.
Let's dispel that myth to start with. Secondly, most developers actually use other people's money. They're not necessarily actually buying stuff with their own cash. Most developers and land purchasers secure stuff on options as well.
Yeah.
You know, they're not
all the big developers are doing options.
Of course they do. Most developers are not into putting their hard-earned cash profit at risk at the whim of what planning they're going to give. So is that necessarily true? No. Of course, developers that have been in the game for 3, 4, 5, 10 years have obviously built up some cash. They've got a bit of a war chest that they might want to use to invest. Are they really going to invest in something which is essentially a bit of a gamble? Because planning's great, But planning is fraught with risk.
Yeah.
And getting planning on one project on this street can be totally different to getting planning on a different street 3 or 4 roads down for the exact same building. It can be completely different. So are they realistically going to put a load of their cash at risk? Not necessarily, no. That doesn't mean they won't make an unconditional offer, but does it get to completion without all of those boxes being ticked? So is it subject to the valuation? Of course it's got to be subject to the valuation, because otherwise it's not worth what you're paying for it. Is it going to be subject to planning? Well, there's different ways of wording that, but essentially, if you haven't got planning permission, the developer isn't going to buy it. They're not going to buy an asset that hasn't got planning or no reasonable prospect of getting planning. And that's why sometimes with commercial, you can speed up or slow down the process of actually acquiring the site to suit other things happening. And, you know, one of the things we teach is actually project management and programming stuff properly. And it's why we use Gantt charts, because if you've got a bar on the Gantt chart for legals and another one for planning, the idea is that the planning one finishes before the legal one does, because then you've got surety of planning.
Yeah.
And there's ways of doing that, of speeding stuff up and slowing it down.
Yeah, there's so much to it, and I think
there's lots of moving parts.
All of this for me is kind of leading towards a question that I'm going to ask you in a minute around some of the training that goes on. But, you know, just coming back to what we was just talking about then about how to compete with other developers, like 100%, if you've got, I don't know, 100 acres of land in a city centre location, or, you know, close to a city centre location that's prime for, you know, development for a huge residential complex, then yes, you're not going to be going for that kind of stuff. And the developers who are going to be going for that kind of stuff, who have hundreds of millions of pounds, right? They have access to funding. They have access.
I think it's the best way to describe it.
That's a whole different world. But when you bring it down to a level where you're just trying to get into it, and that's when you've got there's a huge market of people that are going after those deals if they even come close to stacking. They're really, really hard to secure. But I guess, you know, I think a lot of people are coming out of training courses who haven't necessarily done anything before trying to get into the development game.
Yeah, quite possibly.
And I'd like to know your opinions around that, because, you know, some people that come on here, they have a very different philosophy about, you know, start with your buy-to-lets, and then you're going to do a couple of flips, and then, you know, we're going to do an HMO.
Yeah, some people call it a staircase, others call it a pyramid. Yeah, I know what you mean.
And then you've got the other end of the other, you know, extreme end that's like, oh, you know, you don't need to waste your time with that. You know, you can be working in Tesco's one day, and then you can do this 5-day course, and then you can go out and start building houses. So, you know, where do you stand in that, you know, those two extremes?
Where do I stand? I can understand. What I would say first of all is I can understand both of those viewpoints. What I would say is that the people that I've coached and mentored most successfully are people that have some form of building experience, because they, you know, there's a lot of value in that. However, what I would also say is quite often that can come with limiting beliefs. It can come with misconceptions. Like, I mentor lots and lots of construction trades, and one of the big things for them is that people will never lend them money. Yeah. Which is totally unrealistic and untrue, because I've got mentees that have borrowed 6 and 7 figures from people on personal loans with limited security. So I know it's not true. And, you know, we've used other people's money, and we do use other people's money regularly on simple loan terms. So I think it helps sometimes. Certainly if you're going to do a development, it helps to have done some building types of project. But does it mean other people can't do it? No, because I've got clients that have never done anything in the construction industry before whatsoever, and are going on and have completed successfully new build projects. But they've really, really lent on people externally. They've recognised that it's not their strong point. So they've gone out and they've understood the whole premise of who, not how. And they've actually gone out and said, right, actually, we need somebody to support us with programming. We need someone to set this up properly so that we're going to set ourselves up for success. And you know, they've gone out and smashed it out of the park and got the results. I think it's hard to say, is it one stereotype or the other? Because it very much comes down to the mindset as opposed to the skill set. You know, if somebody's got an absolute warrior mindset that they are going to complete that, they will find a way to do it.
I do agree with what you're saying, and I completely buy into this idea, the Branson philosophy, right? I don't need to know how to fly a plane, drive a train. I just need to surround myself by people that do. I get it. But, and again, real life case study. You were involved in this one as well, working with someone else. You know, we had an offer accepted on this commercial development in central Cambridge.
Mm-hmm.
You know, on paper, it was a very exciting, prospect. The idea of doing a development in central Cambridge, it was exciting. It was something that was great to talk about and brag about. And the numbers were big. It was going to be a huge deal for us. But we went into it without really the knowledge that we needed for that size kind of deal. We bought a project that was advertised as having planning. Mm-hmm. And it was only after the offer was accepted, in a sealed bid process. You never really know what other people are offering, so you never know if you really paid over the odds. All you can do is pay what on paper you calculate that you can afford. And then, we had to go up, profits coming down, go up a little bit more, profits coming down even more, got the deal secured. And then it was only after that we found out it was just kind of like outline planning.
Yeah.
And it had this huge list.
I remember when you came to me with it and said, we've bought this, like, can you help us with it? And it was like, okay, let's look at the conditions. And it was like, it was like till roll.
Yeah, exactly. There was like 50 conditions. Yeah. There was vibration surveys. There was sound surveys. We had to put trees on the roof. There was all this crazy stuff. And, obviously, the whole thing, and it went on for months and months, and we was having all these different conversations. But my point is, Rich, is that even though we went to you, we had our architects, we was talking to people in the planning department, all this kind of stuff, because we'd never done something like that, we were completely 100% dependent on what we were being told.
Yeah, absolutely.
On the phone, right? So yes, it's really the only way to do it. But at the same time, I think that I should be able to have a phone call with you, with the architect, with the planning department, whoever it is, and completely understand in depth what it is that they're telling me to a point where I should at least be able to say, well, I don't really fully agree with this, or could we do it this way instead of that way? Instead of just being like, okay, whatever you say, because I don't know anything. So it just comes back to, can you really, because I see these courses all the time, come on air, developer, whatever it is, and go straight into building new homes. And I don't know, it just doesn't sit with me that you could do that. And I think I do lean a little bit more towards the people who have cut their teeth and come and put in the time and gone through the smaller deals and, been there maybe on the tools even a little bit, surely they're in the best position.
Yes and no, because somebody that's done 50 BRRs isn't, and the stuff that you go through doing that, none of that relates to planning permission necessarily. So being able to understand the whole planning world is a totally different thing. And most of the people that operate in that world have got no knowledge of the compliance part. Most of them have got no knowledge of development funding and all of the stuff that goes with that. So it might be experience in the construction industry, but actually, is it useful and is it translatable? Now, they might know how to manage trades and managing trade interfaces and all of that stuff's great. But none of that's of any use when you're sitting talking to a planning consultant and they're saying, well, actually, we need a PBS. And they're like, okay, what's a PBS? Well, it's parking beat survey. Well, how many BRRs did you do to know that? You don't, So it's about... And it does come back to, like the CDM regs say that before you hire anyone, skills, knowledge, attitude, training, education, experience. And if you've done that and you get on with the people that you've hired as professionals and you have trust in them, you need to hire well so that you're happy to rely on their experience, because effectively that's what you're doing. You're placing your faith in the experience of the people that you're hiring, whether that's your architect, your engineer, your highways consultant, your acoustician, any of the particular people that you might need. I mean, we've got 16 sub-consultants on a project we're working on right now. And we've worked really hard to make sure that we've hired really well for those roles. And we've not paid like bottom end of the market. We haven't necessarily paid top end, except in 2 cases where we've specifically wanted an individual business. But we've understood the risks of going with somebody that's lower or going with somebody that we're not prepared to put so much faith in. So it is about hiring well. You know, I mean, that project, you had 50 planning conditions. That's a lot of planning conditions. It's not the most. I've had projects that are getting up towards 100, but 5 to 10 is far more common.
Yeah.
So I think you did pick a particularly complex project to get started with, and you did go and put an offer in before we'd got involved and done all of that due diligence. I think if you did it again, you'd do it. You know, I mean, that's why we teach 0 to 7. It's about going right from definition right through into all the way through the process.
Hands up, completely did that one back to front. But again, another reason why, you know, you want to be working with someone like Rich. So on that note, I remember you saying when you were going to come on and work with us on the Suffolk project, when we were going to do the guest house, you said that, you know, you could basically pick up that role because what you just said about completely reliant on your team, got to have trust, got to, you know, 100%. They are your eyes, ears, keeping you safe, out of prison, not getting sued, everything, right? It's so important. But again, comes back to the same thing. How do I know who to hire? How do I know where to go? How do I know the conversations to have? So that again is something that falls under what you offer. You go out and source the trades, right?
Yeah, so we can do that. We can go out and source the trades. We can work. We've worked with other clients where we've got a really good relationship and they've got no idea who they need to hire in terms of professional services. So we've actually sat with them and interviewed architects. We've interviewed principal designers. We've talked to structural engineers. I've got a Zoom call this afternoon with 3 different mechanical and electrical designers because one of my mentees needs some support in bringing that forward for a planning condition because we've got to do a load of M&E design for a care home conversion into a HMO. So we're interviewing mechanical and electrical designers for those particular packages. So yeah, we can support people where, you know, I've sat on hundreds of tender panels. I know how to unravel someone like a kid slinky kicking it down the stairs. So
because it comes back to the same thing. If I've never done anything, and I'm going out there and sitting down with a principal, you know, a contractor, so you know, we use the best glass hammers in the industry, right?
Brilliant.
You're in. You know,
exactly.
Like, what do I know?
But that's so important. I mean, I did it on Tuesday this week with a contractor, well, a client who wants to become a contractor, but they want to do it slowly. So they're going to really closely work with a contractor on a HMO project. And I sat on Zoom or Teams, I think it was actually, interviewing this contractor. And I knew within 3 questions, they'd never, ever acted as principal contractor before. I was like, you can't possibly hire these guys. They've got no experience that they can demonstrate of actually doing this. I've done it with other people where they've wanted to place big contracts with contractors and they haven't got the balance sheet or they haven't got the finances to be able to back it up. So they're never going to be able to deliver the project. So yeah, quite often we will come in and we will just support clients with the due diligence part on the really proactive front end stuff. Some clients want us to stay involved and retain us throughout the life of the project. And then we get clients that bring us in when it kind of goes a bit south and they've got too much project left at the end of the money.
Yeah, and you come in and save the day.
Do the post-mortem part. Someone actually called me on LinkedIn last year and they referred to me as the Mary Poppins of construction because I come in, sort all the shit out and go again. And for me, that's what it's about.
You weren't wearing a skirt, were you? I mean,
I wasn't. I only wear that on Sunday. For me, that's what I only want to do stuff where I add value. I don't just want to sit on a team of people getting paid a retainer every month. I want to come in, actually provide a lot of value, sort stuff out for people. If people want some help going forward, brilliant. But we'll have that conversation later on. Let's just focus on fixing the part that we need to fix right now. Let's deliver the value, make sure you're happy, make sure it's set up properly. And then if you want some ongoing support, because that's where the relationship's at, we can have that conversation. But it's not an auto assumption that, oh, okay, well, we'll just put you on a retainer. That's not my model.
Got you. And what happens, Rich, if you know you're responsible for sourcing the team and the principal contractor, and then if they don't follow through, and I'm doing my thing, either in my day job or on holiday or whatever, and I'm I get back and the site's a mess and the guys haven't done their job, I'm coming to kick your ass, right?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And the whole premise of working with us is that we do all the due diligence and the pre-qualification to ensure that actually doesn't happen. Now, that's not to say that every project goes swimmingly. Contractors, most main contractors typically have subcontractors that work for them. And subcontractors are great and some of them are brilliant, some of them are shocking. But that risk is borne by the principal contractor. So yeah, we would support you and say, okay, right, let's have a meeting with the contractor, right? One, the site's a shit tip, like you're not compliant with this and you're in breach of this part of the contract and you shouldn't have done this and you shouldn't have done that. So for us, our value is actually protecting the client with the right toolkit so that effectively as much of it as possible becomes someone else's responsibility.
And are you physically going to site? Like,
sometimes we do, yeah.
How often do you go to site?
It's every single project is individual and bespoke, depending on what the client wants, depending on where the project is, how we need to be involved, and the covenant of the contractor as well. You know, we're working with one contractor and they've got probably 20, maybe 24 people in their management team of their construction business. So that is super well run. We know where every single thing is. In terms from a contract administration point of view, other contractors that are much smaller or people that are doing self-builds we might be on site once a week. Other clients, it's once every couple of weeks. And some clients, it's just we go and meet the valuer because we provide the cost consultancy and the quantity surveying as well. So, you know, we can provide the whole package, but it's bespoke to individual clients.
Yeah. I mean, I just love the idea of, you know, one point of contact, you know, one conversation, and then it's just, you know, you just go on and get on with it. You know, it's ideal. Can you give us an idea of some of the stuff that you've seen that's gone wrong? You know, some of the things, some of the horror stories.
Some of it I can, yeah. Some of it I'm NDA'd, so I can't.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, and sometimes it can be simple stuff. We did a project, or we got bought in to sort out a project last year, which was a HMO, where a client had bought a property, converted it into a HMO. To be fair, they'd hired a contractor. The contractor said, "Oh, we've got a QS. They'll sort out the contract. They'll do all that. They'll deal with all the funding and all that sort of stuff." So, but the client had already got the money, so the client was of the belief that this guy's got a quantity surveyor. Well, yeah, he has, but the quantity surveyor works for the builder. He's not independent like we would be. We're completely impartial. So they bought the property. They spent 200 grand on a refurb. The client believed it was finished. The contractor sent them pictures. All the carpets down. It all looks rosy. Happy days. Go around there and have a look at it. There's no fire doors in it. It's not been built properly. It's not built to building regulations. There's no AOV in it. Because when they originally set it up, they were going to hire consultants to do stuff. But because the builder said, "Oh, well, we've got a site manager. You don't need a project manager. We've got a surveyor. You don't need a QS." People use terminology interchangeably.
Right.
So they were like, okay, well, we don't need to spend that money on that person. We don't need to spend the money on that person. So because they were over budget on the build part, the money for the professionals got taken out and they put it into the build package. So the builder got paid more and effectively just got to charge for the two people that work in his business.
And this comes back to the same thing. If I don't know what I'm doing, and a principal contractor says, "You don't need that, we can take care of that. You don't need that, we can do this." And you can save some money at the same time. I'm all in.
Of course you are. Yeah.
Like you're telling me you can save me some money. I don't need to go out and spend thousands on those extra people. Yeah, we do it all in-house.
Brilliant.
And what am I going to ask for in order to see proof of that? I'm just going to nod my head and say, great.
Yep. And that's the biggest problem, is that people don't ask any of those qualifying questions. Well, and people don't think about, why would that person say that? Like, you know me, I'm massively into neurology, mindset, psychology. If you're sitting there talking to a contractor and like, yeah, you don't need to worry about a QS, why would a contractor not want you to have a QS? That's going to make their life easier to deal with an independent quantity surveyor who's got no emotional attachment to this project whatsoever. It's a business transaction, versus dealing with you, the domestic property investor that doesn't know anything about running a project, that's going to be driven emotionally, worried about money.
Of course.
Why would they say, "No, we don't want to deal with that professional that's going to make our life easy. We want to deal with you, that we're going to get any range of outcome." No idea what it could be. Why would a builder do that? And I do feel a bit like poacher turned gamekeeper saying this, but it's reality and it's the honest truth. The reason they do it is because they know that they can turn you around, spin you around, fold you over and bend you over like a deck chair. Because they can tie you up in terminology, which is just wrong, because all they're doing is tucking people up.
Bit like getting your blinker fluid topped up down their local mechanics.
Exactly.
Yeah. If you like you said, you don't know what you don't know.
No, exactly.
But the thing is with this, it's not just, getting tucked up a little bit over your car down a local mechanic. This is huge numbers, prison time.
Yeah, all sorts of risk.
Scary stuff.
Yeah, and a bit of bird ain't nice, and grey tracksuits are not for everybody. And that's a significant risk. But I mean, we've got another client where we are retained and we're trying to sort out the mess at the moment. They bought a property not a million miles from here to convert a traditional house into a HMO, hired a builder because they were told to by the agent. Turned out the builder and the agent knew each other really well. Big conflict of interest should never have happened. A 17 grand project cost them 120 grand. It's still not finished.
Bloody hell.
The couple that bought it, one of them's had a stroke. and the other one's suffering serious health issues as a result of this project because they didn't actually hire a professional contract administrator or a surveyor to actually sit and administer the contract properly. So as much as the builder's at fault in that situation, equally so is the client, because there's loads of stuff they haven't done that they should have done in accordance with the contract, like provide information in a timely manner, crystallise the specification, issue payment certificates on time. Because doing property commercially, which can be just a house, it doesn't matter. If you're doing it as a business, it's commercial. There's all sorts of, there's legislation called Housing Grants, Construction and Regeneration Act about how to pay people on time. It's not exactly like really sexy reading. At clause 111, which gives you an idea about how big it is, it tells you about issuing payless notices. No one in property issues payless notices. Well, that's great, but actually it means you're legally required to pay the builder's invoice in full.
Yeah, it's such a deep subject.
Yeah.
I feel the same now as I did the last time I saw you speak. I'm like, what the bloody hell is he talking about?
Yeah. But thing is, that's my world. It's what I've been doing for decades.
Yeah, so. and that's why you keep coming back to this. I keep coming back to the same point. You know, you have to get someone like yourself in to protect yourself in all these different areas. And hopefully during this episode, we've explained it well enough to people to at least realise that you don't have to be building, 100 house development in order to need this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
You even at the most basic level of doing rent-to-rent deals, which is mind-blowing to me, if you're doing any kind of works, you need to be considering this stuff.
Yeah, you need to be compliant.
So what is it, Rich, that you're doing today? What is it that you're teaching? How does it work? What's the opportunities people have got to work with you?
So we work with clients in a few different ways. So we do teach people. We've got a product called Project Management Blueprint, which is what I spent a year writing back in 2020. So it's a 3-day training course teaching people project management. But not only does it teach people how to do it, it actually gives people the toolkit. So all of the forms, all of the documents, all of the data, all the information you need is there as a business in a box to go and implement on your own project. So we teach that. I've got 3 mastermind groups of trades, investors, people that want to work with us on a retained basis, which then it's application only, and it's very much a 2-way interview process. It's like, can we work with you? Can you work with us? I teach commercial property. We've got our own projects that we work on, and yeah, that's how I sort of spend my time. I've done an awful lot of speaking gigs in the last sort of 2 or 3, maybe 4 years. I'm doing a bit less of that now. I enjoy doing it. I love doing it. But for personal reasons, I'm not doing as much as I was. And then we do consultancy work for clients as well. And I'm non-exec of 6 construction businesses. So I don't actually feel like a work, if I'm honest, because I love what I do. So, I don't wake up with dread thinking, oh no, I've got to do this today. It's like, I genuinely love what I do. So yeah, it's kind of a real balance of stuff. We do individual consultancy stuff for people in property. So people can have the opportunity to just book an hour or 2 hours of our time to look at doing a project appraisal before they get into spending tens of thousands on their project. So yeah, there's lots of different ways that people can work with us.
Yeah, you're a busy man. You got a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah, I've got a lot, but it's all stuff I enjoy doing. So
I was going to say, to have all that going on and not feel like you're working says just how much you love what you're doing.
Yeah, I do. I love what I do, but I also spend quite a bit of time on my mindset. I'm a massive advocate of working on your mindset as well as your skill set. So yeah, I do a lot of that sort of stuff as well. Well,
let's speak about that for a couple of minutes, because that is something that I'm, very, very passionate about as well. And I think even before, you've done the training, you've gone out and found the money and all that kind of stuff. You can't really do any of that. There's no point doing any of that until you actually believe that you can do it.
Yeah, I think you need to have the belief that you can do it. I think that comes from having confidence in the people you've learnt from, because, you can borrow confidence. If you're working and you've been taught by somebody that can clearly demonstrate that they've been doing this for a long time and that they've actually also got the skills, knowledge, attitude, training and education and experience, then there's nothing wrong with placing your confidence in the confidence of the person that's taught you. But you've got to take action. You've actually got to do it. And that's the bit where a lot of people struggle, is they'll have the knowledge, but then they won't go and implement it, or life will get in the way, or a conversation with someone at work or a member of the family will get in the way. Something could get in the way and it will prevent them from taking action. And I think that's really sad, because all people are doing is putting obstacles in the way of them achieving what they actually wanted, which is why they put themselves in the place to learn that subject in the first place.
Yeah, and I don't know what you think about this, but I've done a lot of training. You've done a lot of training. Investing in yourself is an investment, really. I think As long as you're investing with the right people.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you're not getting scammed by some of the snake oil salesmen out there, which there are a lot of at the minute. And that's only going to get worse. So do your due diligence. But what I see a lot of the time is that when people are in the room and, it's the high fives and the energy's high and all the rest of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Everyone feels like they can go out and take on the world, and they're going to be millionaires in 12 months and all the rest of it. And some of them go on to do that. But the majority of people walk out, and by the time they even get to their car, it's like it all falls away.
Yeah, there's a big energy drop. And, we've got a lot of Trustpilot testimonials for my own blueprint course. And one, I'm personally connected to every single one of those testimonials. But one of the ones that I'm most connected to was from a guy who's spent over 6 figures on training in the last 2 years. And he said, this is the first time I've ever been at an event and nobody has tried to sell me anything. He said, I want to work with you next year. How do I work with you? I was like, well, send me a message on social media. We can book a call and we'll have a conversation next week. And he was like, literally, you could see from his face. He was like, why don't you just take my card now? Like, because I choose to run my business in this manner. And that's no reflection on anyone else, because, everybody has the right to run their business the way they choose to, and there's no right or wrong in it. But it's about how I want to run my business, and I want to work with people that I think are gonna. If I'm gonna spend time working with someone on an ongoing basis, I want to know that they're going to take action.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, I'd rather spend time with somebody else who is going to take action.
Yeah, because it works both ways, right? You want them to go out and do good things, so reflect well on you.
Yeah, I got into this originally a good number of years ago now, because I'd always coached and mentored people in business, in a business to business, when I'd managed teams. And when I got diagnosed with ulcerative colitis, one of my mentors said to me, all of your knowledge, if I could take all of that and learn it all, it would help me. And I was like, but you're my mentor. And he's like, yeah, but you know so much about construction management and cost consultancy. I could never learn all that. He said, you can't take that with you. You need to share it with other people. So that is what my goal is. That is my legacy, is actually helping other people. So I want to teach people that are actually going to go and implement it. Because teaching someone that's never going to do anything with it is pointless.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And, we talk about that a lot with our mentees as well, is whatever you do, and most people think, I don't know anything, I've got no value, I've got no knowledge to share. But the fact is, if you're on this earth and you more than, 30 years old, there's a chance that you've got a hell of a lot of knowledge in your head about something.
Yep.
And you know a lot about something that is of value to other people.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you should. It's really the right thing to do, is to share that with other people, if it can bring value to the world.
Yeah, I mean, if you go back to cave times when people lived in caves, that's why they drew on walls and that sort of stuff. It was to share knowledge and pass information on to the later generations.
Yeah. That's how I still teach, like little matchstick men and,
I do a lot of drawing, I have to say, because I'm a very visual learner, and we tend to teach in the way that we like to learn. So I'm a very, very, very visual learner.
Yeah, same. Well, look, mate, it's been a fantastic conversation. So much value there. No way that we can cover anywhere near it. Like the amount of it, it's so in-depth, so involved. Again, just keeps coming back to another reason why you need to work with Rich. I just want to ask you one or two last questions before we wrap up, for the benefit of people listening at home. As someone who's, very educated, very knowledgeable about the property markets, what's going on, the direction we're heading in, all the different strategies, you've probably done most of them. What would you now, if you were starting out, and people are sitting at home listening, watching to this, thinking, well, I love the idea of what Rich is doing, could fancy a bit of development. I listened to Emma last week. She was talking about flipping properties, and I listened to the guy before doing SA. That's sexy as well. What would you be investing in now if you could start today fresh?
If I could start today fresh.
2025 on. What's the best strategy?
For me, it would be commercial property, because the tax breaks for doing it are far more significant, because you can put it into different pension types than you can put residential in. You've got a whole different relationship with the tenant, because it's a commercial tenant, not a residential tenant. So their rights are totally different, and it's purely a business to business transaction. You're talking about renting units or renting businesses to a company. There's no emotion in that whatsoever. It's not someone's home. It's a business premise. So it's completely different. The tenancies are a lot longer, and there's far more protection in those tenancies than there is in a residential tenancy. So for me, that would always be the one that that I would come back to. That's not to say, I mean, we like mixed use where you've got commercial on the ground floor and residential above. We're looking at some solely commercial, but yeah, that's what I would have tried to get to that point quicker had I understood that 20 odd years ago when I was building them for other people.
So when you say commercial, are you talking specifically about like Class E stuff that can be converted into resi, or are you talking about...
So some conversion and some new build as well. So some of the stuff we're doing, we're buying assets that might have ability to do other stuff on the same site. We're buying assets which might be being flattened and then rebuilt using the rights that exist under permitted development to take something from solely commercial to mixed use where it's commercial on the lower floors and residential on the upper floors.
100% agree about the commercial thing. I was actually driving here. I was having a conversation with my lettings manager for one of my buy-to-lets up in Manchester, and we were going through some of the applications because one of the tenancies ended. And everyone I'm listening to, I'm just like, whoop, like alarm bells.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ding, ding, ding. Just I'm like, this is not going to go well. This person's not going to pay rent. I'm not going to be able to get them out. I'm going to get stuck with it's just the residential stuff it's
a different environment to what it was 5 years ago. And, that's not to say it's not a good place to park some cash.
Yeah.
That's not to say that BRR is not a good model because hell, who wouldn't love a portfolio of 100 properties with none of your own money in it? Of course.
Yeah.
But for me, it's about, I don't want to be that. I don't want to be busy. I want to be productive.
Yeah.
So if I can sit in one design meeting for one project and we've got 80 units or 100 units on it, I'd have to have 80 or 100 meetings to achieve that doing other models. I've done SA. I'm not a massive fan of it. We did it. It was cool. The capital allowances were pretty sexy, I've got to say. Thank you, Arthur. You're watching.
Mr. Kemp.
That was really cool. But yeah, it's not really me. I know my lane. I know the groove I'm in. Yeah. I like that. And I want to stick to doing what I enjoy doing.
I get that. And lastly, kind of touching on the mindset thing again, what's one thing, everybody is listening at home, desperate to get out of the day job, hating life, sludging through, not fulfilled, not happy, broke. Let's be honest, a lot of people
are struggling, aren't they? Especially right now.
It's tough out there. And they want to get ahead. They want to grow. They want to change. They want to get into something else, most probably property related, listening to this. What's the one thing, a mindset thing that they can start to implement every day that's going to help them to move forward?
Okay. So there's a few things. I think the first one is that you need to understand that we've all got you've got the same amount of hours in your day as I've got. It's about what we do with it, right? So it's not about being busy, it's about being productive. So I would learn the principle of the 12-week year because I think it's absolutely game changing in terms of getting results quicker.
Is that a book?
Yeah, it's a book. And then the other thing is, before you do anything that's not fundamental like eating or going to the loo, think about, am I spending my time doing this or am I investing my time doing it? And if you're just spending your time doing it, think about actually, is that really serving me? And that's not to say that you've got to become a 24/7 workaholic, but one of the things that I found that really, really changed our results and changed our trajectory was when I started investing in my own personal development and my own mindset, because you become far more aware of actually what you're doing and far more conscious about where you're placing your time, where you're placing your energy, how much time you're investing in relationships. And that can be relationships with all sorts of stuff. It doesn't even necessarily have to be with people. It can be your relationship with social media. Are you a consumer? Are you a producer? Just simply flicking that switch for a lot of people buys them back hours a day. I mean, I haven't looked at it probably for a couple of weeks, but I know my phone usage time's like 8.5, 9 hours a day. Well, that's because I run a lot of our projects literally from my phone. So my phone usage is massive. My socials usage is probably 15, 20% of that because I'm spending time creating content, looking at content, watching other speakers, watching comedians, because I massively love the speaking that I do and I want to always be a better speaker. So I'm kind of like learning that sort of stuff. So are you spending time or are you actually investing in it? You can educate yourself in lots of ways. You can educate yourself on a lot of stuff for free these days with things like YouTube and the amount of content that's on there. So it's not always necessarily about running to go and purchase a course of some description, but actually educate yourself and work out what you want to do and have a plan. Have a 1, 3 and 5 year plan of actually, right, this is where I want to get to. Because, better to have a plan and achieve 75% of it than have no plan and achieve 100% of nothing.
Yeah.
Because you just keep doing the same thing over and over again. And if it's not getting you the results you want and you are literally like just over broke, then that's all you're ever going to be. If you don't change something, nothing will change.
Yeah, and I think with the time thing, it's it's kind of like you only start to panic and worry about it once it's starting to slip
Once you
away.
get a bit of grey.
Yeah, once you get the old wisdom whiskers start coming through.
Yeah, definitely.
But until then, you're like, oh yeah, another few hours on TikTok, whatever, you know, I've got all the time in the world. And then all of a sudden it's like, shit, I've got to get a move on.
Yeah, I think for everybody, something will happen that will make you think, yeah, it's not guaranteed. There's no guarantee of tomorrow. So you've got to try and have plans and work towards them, but also be conscious and actually be present as well. Be present in the moment. I had a really interesting conversation a while back now, actually on Clubhouse, with a guy, and he felt a real tremendous sense of guilt because he was a super successful entrepreneur. I don't even know how he agreed for me to have a conversation with him really, but he did. And he said he felt tremendous sense of guilt when he was sitting at home on a Sunday afternoon with his family and they're like playing board games and stuff with his kids. Because he's thinking about next week's board meeting or what's happening with their P&L. And he's like, everybody in my family thinks I'm sitting there and I'm present. He said, and I'm not, because I'm so, he was so driven. And he had a phrase which I've borrowed extensively with his permission. And that is that you can't go on a journey in 2 cars.
Oh, nice.
And for him, he's got multiple 7 and 8 and I think probably now maybe even like bigger figure businesses. He's highly successful. But he's like, I could never have achieved all of that if it wasn't for my amazing wife and parents who've actually like been there to support my kids. And his kids are like smashing it. They're all doing really well in their own lane. But he's like, I had to stay in my lane to get the business results. That's where my personal sovereignty comes from.
Yeah, God, it's such a big subject. Maybe we can do another one around all that kind of stuff in the future.
Yeah, listen, always happy to talk about that sort of stuff.
Mate, it's been a great conversation. You know who to call if you're doing any kind of projects and you want to be safe, you want to be protected, you want to make sure your numbers stack, you want to make sure you're hiring the right people and kind of limiting the amount of stress that you're going to experience throughout the project. You need to give this man a call. We're going to put all of Richard's links in the show notes, all his social handles, websites. All right, for people to reach out to you and pick your brains.
Feel free. Yeah, anybody that wants to go from unsure to unstoppable, just drop me a message.
Yeah, and the point of this episode, guys, was not to scare you or stop you from moving forward and going after these bigger projects, but it's to kind of educate you about the realities behind it. Because on a lot of these courses, you're just going to get sold the sexy fluff and you can go out there and it can all go tits up on the first deal and then you never move forward after that because you've lost everything. So you need to know what you're doing from day one. Mate,
brilliant.
Fantastic conversation. Great episode. Thanks everybody for listening and watching at home. We'll see you next week on another episode of the Airbnb Nomads podcast. Till then, take care. Goodbye.